Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/prorevenge, where people tell us their best stories on when they got revenge on someone or something they didn't like. If you're new around here, please do hit subscribe down below so that you never miss out on another video. But for now, let's sit back, relax and enjoy some pro-revenge stories. The bad grocery place. I've written before about the good grocery store where I worked in high school. We had a couple of bad customers and a lot of senile seniors, but it was well run with a great manager. The one I worked at for one summer in college was the bad place. It was 1994, in a chain grocery store with a truly awful manager who was straight out of business school. He was also the regional officer's director's son, so he was Teflon. Anything that went wrong got pinned on an assistant manager and or hushed up at the regional level. Awful had managed to install his mistress as one of the assistant managers. I only saw her in the store twice, and both times she was shopping. One of the times she didn't even pay. Awful paid no attention to people's time constraints. We had a bunch of teenagers there who were attending summer school. He didn't care. He scheduled however he wanted and left us to swap shifts among ourselves. I personally saw him tell one girl she'd have to miss school because he needed her on shift and she couldn't find coverage. Crazy illegal. He didn't care about legalities. Awful's belief was that if the computer would accept it, then it was fine. It was the early days of computerized payroll, so the system would take literally anything with no checks. He made the teenagers work hours they legally couldn't. I'm talking too late or too early and lots of overtime. If they complained, he threatened to fire them. That was his answer to everything, and work wasn't easy to come by in that area. There were teenagers in tears because he wouldn't let them take time for family vacations, or they were being forced to miss tests at school. One guy was fired because he went to his sister's wedding. He'd warned Awful about it for months in advance, and it was a holiday weekend, so nobody could swap. Awful was very rarely, if ever, in the store his entire shift. He'd clock in, get a few really important things done, and then leave. He'd come back in the middle of his shift to do the bank deposits, then be gone again until it was time to clock out. He assigned all his work to the latest guy's fall assistant's manager or other random employees. If he was the only manager on duty, he'd leave his badge for overrides on the desk in the office so we could grab it when they needed to override register errors. All of this was massively against company policy. I mentioned in a previous post how National was pretty obsessed with mystery shopper reports, and got them directly from the company that did that stuff. We'd get all kinds of conflicting instructions because National's edicts, based on those and our regional director's policies, would differ. Always fun. What I didn't mention was mystery shoppers were trivial to spot. They'd go straight to the bakery to price out a special order cake, then not buy it, complain about the price, or ask any of the normal questions. They also went to the bathroom, the fish counter, asked for a price check, and made us unring something they decided they didn't want during checkout. There were other things on the list, but those are the obvious ones I remember all these years later. My last week at this awful place, before I headed back to college, I spotted a blatant mystery shopper, complete with notepad. Awful had bugged out shortly after open. The mistress was probably busy with him. The other assistant manager had been fired for the last colossal screw-up, and the only other cashier on shift was at lunch. It was pretty dead as it was late morning, so no big deal. Except that I decided it was time for this awful place to get reported for what it was. When Mystery came up with her price check item, I forgot to hit the price check button and rang it up for real. Whoops. Time to go get the manager's override badge. I overrode it. Then I tossed that bad boy so hard it went all the way across the manager's desk and down into the sea of cables behind it in the corner. Whoops. I'm quite sure that if you went to the tapes, this looked incredibly intentional. It was my last week. You could count the cares I gave on no hands. Somewhere around this time, the other cashier, we'll call her Jenny, got back from her lunch break and I informed her that stuff was about to get real. She might want to go home sick if she wanted some cover. Nah, Jenny giggled and wanted a front row seat. Besides, the lunch rush was coming. We had a construction area nearby and a lot of the guys came for the prepared foods for a cheap, hot lunch. We started to get the lunch rush and more of a crowd by the time Mystery made it up to my register to check out. Of course, she needed me to unring something for her checklist. So, I flipped on the help me Obi-Wan light. Nothing happened. I called for Awful over the intercom by manager's first name last name. Jenny caught on real fast and told me to just go get the badge from the office. Awful first name last name must be doing the money drop or something. I pointed out to Jenny that that was against company policy. She rolled her eyes and told me that's what Awful first name last name had said to do. Now, where was that override badge? I headed up to the office and made a good show of looking for it. Called down for Jenny, asking if she had it. Nope. Jenny abandoned the big order she was ringing up and came up to the little office to give a cursory look around. This is where the whole story took a turn I hadn't gamed out. See, I was just going to give Mystery a very bad visit with many violations to report. There'd have been an embarrassing reaming from national and possibly even an investigation. Jenny had other plans. Jenny was going nuclear. Jenny apologized to the mystery shopper, but she was going to have to get in Jenny's line now. I couldn't void the transaction or log in the two registers at once, so I was going to help her pack it up and Jenny would get to mystery as soon as she could. Now, this is somewhat BS. While true as stated, we all knew how to unplug the registers to get them to reset and log us out. It was a dumb hack, but it worked. Thing was, there was almost zero chance Awful or Mystery knew that. Mystery must have loved her mystery shopping gig because she was the most cheerful, screwed over customer you ever did see. She smiled, assured us everything was fine, and scribbled in her notebook the whole time. Literally while I'm loading up Mystery's cart at my register, Jenny accidentally rang up a gallon of milk about 6 times. Whoops. No override card, no manager, no head cashier with any power either. Cost saving cuts there the Awful made early in his days before I arrived. We apologized profusely to the customers, but explained that we had no idea where Awful was. Offered to check in the back, sent a bagger out to check in the lot in case Awful was on a smoke break. No joy. As this fiasco rolled on, we had a lot of very unhappy customers on our hands. And the downright giddy Mystery who stayed to the bitter end. We were demanded to call a manager. We tried all Awful's known numbers. Who's above him? Oh, that's regional. We were not allowed to call them. Very strict instructions. True and very against company policy. From manager first name last name. But we can give you their number. Phone's right over there. Many took advantage. We also got yelled at a lot. But in spite of some sympathy from the customers, we were loving every second of it. Regional took about 2 hours to get someone down to the store who could clear the registers. Nobody else in the store had permissions on that system. Awful still hadn't shown up. Regional dude overrode the registers, but by then the damage was done. We'd missed the whole lunch rush. No hot food was sold. Our metrics for the day were going to be unbelievably bad. Regional dude was on the phone frantically trying to figure out how to cover this mess up for his boss, Awful's father, and decided to blame it on a computer outage. I think they intentionally broke some equipment to help sell that story. Awful rolled in after I clocked out, but I'm told Regional dude was still there doing Awful's job. Awful was unbearable for the next couple of days, but I had one foot out of the door. Jenny, it turned out, simply didn't care because she'd been doing the work of a head cashier without the pay. It took a few weeks for the fallout to happen, and you bet I kept in touch with Jenny to find out. From this point, I only know what Jenny told me as I was back in college a few states away. A few weeks later, an audit team from National came down to investigate. The mystery shopper story hadn't lined up with the computer outage story, and something was obviously hinky. They dug into the books and found all the labour violations for minors working overtime and too early/late. Interviewed the employees and found out about the scheduling during school time problems. Manager absenteeism. No vacation being allowed. Also, that the store was constantly short-staffed. No, really. People ran for the hills as soon as they got anything else. Finally, that an assistant manager was on payroll full-time, but nobody had ever seen her work. She clocked in and out within seconds of AM every shift he worked, but was never there. Them dots ain't hard to connect. I don't know if they covered up all the labour violations or not. Probably, that would have caused massive fines. I was too young to know how to report them. However, Awful, his father, and his mistress all got fired or resigned quietly. The store reportedly went back to being pretty functional after that. Jenny got a better job and left within the year. I never worked retail again. I'm still really confused as to why the mystery shopper had a notepad around with her. Like, surely that takes away from the mystery part of it if you can really exactly tell that they have a notepad and writing like, oh, this person did this bad and this person did this good. Boss mistreats new guys, so new guys get boss demoted and then fired. So, back in my 20s, I worked for a large national sewer and drain company called Roto-Rooter. A great job and a great place to work where I was lucky enough to be trained by some of the most skilled technicians in the industry. There was, however, one supervisor, let's call him Billy. Now Billy was your typical kiss-up, who spent most of his time trying to please anyone who he thought held any influence, the senior techs, or power, the branch and regional manager, and loved to lord his power. He made the shift schedules and scheduled time off over anyone who he thought he could push around. A typical interaction with one of the big earners, this is a commission job, would be something like, hey, you need a day off? Sure, let me just know when and I will be happy to help you. While if he was dealing with a new hire or a low earner, you were lucky if he would pick up the phone or take a second to hear you out. So one night around my 3rd month on the job, I was sent to a mortuary to do some work. And while it was gross, hazard jobs like that paid really well. Maybe $200 in your pocket for an hour's work. When it was done, I called and told him I was taking the rest of the night off due to some chemicals in the sewer making me feel a little woozy, and I didn't think it would be safe for me to operate heavy machinery. He flipped out and told me that if I didn't get back on the road, I would have a disciplinary hearing the next day. To which I said, sure, can't wait to see you there. As soon as I walked in, I requested someone from HR to be present, as well as our assigned safety officer. The safety officer position in the company is very important, as the company self-insures and any safety violation can get you fired on the spot. I let Billy go first, and he says, you can't leave whenever you want from your shift. You are getting a warning, and next time I'm going to fire you. I calmly reach into my bag and pull out our employee handbook and begin to read. While I don't remember the exact phrasing, it goes something like this. If you feel at any time that the situation or job you are in/on is dangerous or may lead to a dangerous situation, you are to stop immediately. There was another section about being inebriated, exposed to methane gas from the sewer, being lightheaded, etc., and how you should go home and not operate any equipment under those conditions. It even went so far as to say that transportation would be paid for by the company if you didn't feel safe driving. They were very big on safety since any insurance claims would be paid by them directly. I asked the safety manager if I did anything wrong, and he supported me 100%. Then I asked HR about what they thought, and they said, if it's a safety issue, you go home and don't worry about your shift. At this point, the regional manager asked me to leave the office, and I hear him rip into Billy like a fat kid into cake. That should have been enough for me, but I am petty. I never forgive, and I am very patient. As time goes on, I become one of the top earners in my city, get Rookie of the Year for my first year and Salesman of the Year for my second. And Billy gets a reputation of being lazy and irresponsible. My second year at the company, Billy is put on probation, and this is where I go into pro-revenge mode. I gather up all of the new guys and some of my buddies from my shift, and I organize them so at least once or twice a week, someone goes in there to complain about Billy. We never lied, we just knew what buttons to push to get him to self-destruct. New guys would ask for a day off, or someone would take a sick day during a busy shift, etc. Finally, the branch manager snaps and calls Billy into his office. He demotes him to salesman and puts him on my shift. At a company like this, the shifts become very close. We all talk in our trucks through our radios while waiting for jobs, and we all help each other when needed. During Billy's first few weeks on the road, our supervisor makes sure he gets all the fun jobs. Flooded basements, tight spaces, and generally anything that will get him absolutely covered in poop. And, of course, as all this was happening, I had every single person I was friends with at the company call him and ask him for scheduling changes, so he had to explain to about 30 people how he was demoted and no longer a manager. Eventually, Billy broke. He started crying at the dispatcher about how he couldn't take it anymore and quit. The next day, me and two other guys threw a Billy's Gone party with cake and pizza at the neighborhood bar, put up signs in the office, and made a general announcement in the morning when we went to hand in paperwork, when we knew Billy would be there to give in his 2 weeks notice. He actually came up to us to thank us, and I got the pleasure of informing him that he's not invited. It's not a going away party, it's a you're gone party. It wouldn't make sense for you to be at the party when we are celebrating you not being around us anymore. In the end, only about 20 of the 50 employees at the branch showed up, but it was still a great party. Edit, so people wanted to know more about what Billy did to be despised. So I said me and two other guys threw a party. The first guy had his 12-year-old died of cancer about a year before Billy left. Billy tried to have him fired twice for excessive absences. Guy 2 landed a $64,000 contract with a large well-known hotel chain, and Billy had the contract assigned to another tech, saying he was not experienced enough for it, against his supervisor's advice. Billy had a new guy written up for having a messy van. Most of our vans were disasters, so it was just being a douchebag. He would grant some people's vacation requests with the caveat that he may need them if he gets too busy, so they couldn't travel. If you were a low earner, he would essentially cancel your vacation and put you on call against the company policies. There are a million more, but I feel like the more I say, the easier it is to find out personal info. He really should have mentioned how much of a douchebag Billy was earlier in the story, because I actually felt a bit bad for him by the end of it when he was coming in for his 2 weeks notice. But after hearing that kind of stuff at the end, I was just like, maybe he did deserve it. Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like, and if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.